What would you do if you won £2.4 million in the lottery? Buy a mansion, travel the world, retire on a beach somewhere? John Eric Spiby had a different plan. Instead of living out his golden years in comfort, this 65-year-old pensioner used his winnings to build one of Britain's most sophisticated drug manufacturing operations. This is the story of how a lottery millionaire became the kingpin of an industrial-scale counterfeit pill empire, and how encrypted messages would eventually bring it all crashing down. John Eric Spiby was born in May 1945, growing up in working-class England during the post-war years. For most of his life, he was just an ordinary man living an ordinary life in Greater Manchester. He worked, paid his bills, and probably dreamed like millions of others about what he would do if he ever struck it rich. Then, in 2010, at the age of 65, that dream became reality. Spiby won £2.4 million in the lottery. Most people his age would see this as the ultimate retirement package. Financial security for the rest of his days. The chance to spoil grandchildren, take cruises, live comfortably without ever worrying about money again. But John Spiby was not most people. Instead of retirement, Spiby saw opportunity. Not the legitimate kind, but something far more profitable and infinitely more dangerous. He had money now, real money, and he decided to invest it in a business that would make his lottery winnings look like pocket change. Spiby began planning something that would eventually produce pills worth hundreds of millions of pounds on the street. But he was not going to do this alone. He needed partners, people he could trust, people who shared his vision of building an empire. His first recruit was his own son, John. The younger Spiby was 37 years old when the operation was in full swing, and he became an integral part of his father's criminal enterprise. Blood is thicker than water, they say, and in the Spiby family, it was also thicker than the law. The second key player was Lee Ryan Drury. Aged 45, Drury brought crucial technical know-how and the ability to create elaborate cover stories. He would become the architect of their legitimacy facade, the man who made their illegal operation look legal on paper. The third member of the crew was Callum Dorian. Aged 35, Dorian was the youngest of the group, but he brought connections that would prove invaluable. Connections to firearms, connections to distribution networks, connections that would help this operation scale to industrial levels. The team was assembled, the money was ready. Now they needed a location. Spiby owned a cottage in Astley, Tildesley, on Lower Green Lane. It was a quiet area, the kind of place where neighbors minded their own business. Perfect for what he had in mind. Right behind his cottage sat a set of stables. Most people would use them for horses, storage, maybe a workshop. Spiby had different plans. Using his lottery winnings, he began purchasing industrial-grade machinery. Tablet presses, mixers, packaging equipment. The kind of machinery that could produce tens of thousands of pills per hour. He was not just buying equipment either. Spiby was purchasing raw materials, chemicals, and most importantly, etizolam, a substance he would use to create counterfeit diazepam tablets. The stables were transformed. What once housed animals now housed an industrial-scale pharmaceutical operation. Nothing about it was legitimate. These were not licensed drugs produced under medical supervision. These were counterfeit pills, unregulated, unlicensed, and completely unchecked. Every pill that came out of that stable was essentially a game of Russian roulette for whoever took it. But Spiby was not content with just one location. As demand grew and production increased, he realized he needed to expand. In 2021, he purchased an industrial unit on Albion Street in Swinton, Salford. This was not a small investment. This was a serious business decision. He was scaling up, converting the unit into a second production facility that would dramatically increase their capacity to manufacture counterfeit tablets. Meanwhile, Drury was working on the cover story. In August 2020, he created a fake company, complete with a professional-looking website. The website advertised tablet presses, mixers, packaging machines, and powdered supplements. To anyone looking from the outside, it appeared to be a legitimate business selling equipment and supplements. In reality, it was pure deception, a front that allowed them to order equipment, receive shipments, and operate without raising suspicion. They were hiding in plain sight, their criminal enterprise disguised as a lawful business. But they still needed storage, a place to keep the millions of pills they were producing before distribution. That is where the shipping container came in. Drury rented a shipping container on Chaddock Lane in Astley. It was controlled by the group and used specifically to store materials and the millions of counterfeit tablets waiting to be distributed across the country. The operation was running smoothly. Production was at an all-time high. Money was flowing in faster than any of them had imagined. Between 2020 and 2022, the Spiby organization was producing pills with a bulk value estimated between 7.2 million and 12.9 million pounds. But on the street, the potential value was staggering, between 57.6 million and 288 million pounds. At 65 pence per pill, they were moving massive quantities. Spiby was feeling invincible, so much that he started getting cocky. In messages to his crew, he boasted that Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos should watch their backs, suggesting he saw himself as operating on their level. A lottery winner from Greater Manchester comparing himself to tech billionaires. The hubris was real. But while Spiby was busy comparing himself to billionaires, law enforcement was watching, and they had a secret weapon. In 2020, British and European law enforcement agencies launched Operation Venetic. This was not just another drug investigation. It was a massive operation targeting organized crime that relied on encrypted communication platforms, specifically Encrypted. Criminals around the world had been using Encrypted, believing their messages were completely secure, untraceable, anonymous. They were wrong. Law enforcement had cracked the encryption. During the Venetic investigation, officers obtained evidence of a user with the handle Fallen Soda. The messages linked to this account were damning. They showed the facilitation and supply of serious firearms, including AK-47s, an Uzi, Tech-9s, a Scorpion, a Grand Power pistol, silencers, and ammunition. But the messages also revealed something else: the orchestration of large-scale production of counterfeit diazepam tablets containing etazolum. Fallen Soda was eventually identified as Callum Dorian. Between November 2021 and May 2022, the investigation intensified. The Spiby Group was now under active surveillance. Officers identified the key properties: the cottage stables, the Albion Street Industrial Unit, and the Chaddock Lane storage container. They watched. They waited. They gathered evidence. Then came April 1st, 2022. Officers observed Dorian and Drury loading a hire van with boxes from the Chaddock Lane storage site. They allowed them to load it completely and then intercepted the vehicle. Inside, officers discovered 2.6 million counterfeit diazepam tablets. The estimated street value was between 1.04 million and 5.2 million pounds, all in a single van. But the authorities weren't done. They had enough evidence now. It was time to take down the entire operation. On May 17, 2022, officers executed multiple warrants simultaneously. They hit every location connected to the Spiby organization. What they found was staggering. 3 viable firearms, ammunition, cash, industrial tablet manufacturing machinery capable of producing tens of thousands of pills per hour, significant quantities of counterfeit tablets, raw materials ready for production. The empire that took years to build collapsed in a single day. All 4 men were arrested and remanded into custody. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Encrypted messages, surveillance footage, millions of pills, industrial equipment, firearms. There was no talking their way out of this one. Callum Dorian was the first to be sentenced. In September 2024, he received 12 years in prison for conspiracy to supply firearms and conspiracy to produce and supply Class C drugs. His encrypted messages on Encrypted had sealed his fate. John Eric Spiby Sr. and his son, John Colin Spiby Jr., both denied the charges. They took it to trial, gambling that they could beat the case. In November 2025, after hearing all the evidence, the jury found them guilty. On January 27, 2026, Spiby Sr. stood before Bolton Crown Court for sentencing. The judge sentenced him to 16 years and 6 months in prison for conspiracy to produce and supply Class C drugs, 2 counts of possessing a firearm, possession of ammunition, and perverting the course of justice. At 80 years old, John Spiby would likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. His son, John Colin Spiby Jr., received 9 years in prison for conspiracy to produce and supply Class C drugs. Lee Ryan Drury, the man who created the fake company and tried to legitimize their operation, pleaded guilty midway through the trial. Perhaps he saw which way the wind was blowing. Perhaps he hoped for leniency. He was sentenced to 9 years and 9 months in prison. Combined, the 4 members of the Spiby organization received almost 50 years in prison. Detective Inspector Alex Brown from the Serious Organized Crime Group did not mince words when discussing the case. He said these 4 individuals showed absolutely no regard for human life or public safety. They operated a fully industrialized drug manufacturing business, capable of producing millions of counterfeit tablets containing highly dangerous substances. The volume of tablets recovered and the sophisticated machinery demonstrated how deeply embedded this group was in the illicit drug supply chain. But it was not just about the pills. The group was also linked to the supply of deadly firearms, including automatic weapons and ammunition. This combination presented a serious threat to communities not just in Greater Manchester, but across the entire country and beyond. Think about that for a moment. John Spiby had £2.4 million. He could have traveled, spoiled his grandchildren, and enjoyed retirement without a care in the world. Instead, he chose to build a criminal empire. He involved his own son. He manufactured millions of pills that people took without knowing what they were really consuming. He dealt in firearms that could have been used to take lives. And for what? More money? Ego? The thrill of building something illegal and dangerous? The people who bought those counterfeit pills were playing Russian roulette with their lifshins. They thought they were getting legitimate medication. Instead, they were getting unregulated substances produced in a converted stable by people who cared only about profit. This case shows how organized crime has evolved. This was not a street-level drug dealer. This was an industrial operation with fake companies, professional websites, and multiple facilities run like a legitimate business. The only difference? Everything about it was illegal. John Eric Spiby made a choice in 2010 when he won that lottery. He chose crime over comfort. He chose greed over peace. Now, at 80 years old, he will spend whatever time he has left behind bars, his lottery winnings long gone, his freedom forfeited. The stables in Astley are empty now. The industrial unit in Salford has been shut down. The machinery has been seized. The pills have been destroyed. And 4 men sit in prison cells, their empire dismantled, their freedom gone. From lottery winner to convicted criminal, he won millions and lost everything, including his freedom.